I have just received the sad news that another music great has passed away. Ralph Towner has died at the age of 85. An absolute giant of music and a musician who was so unique in his approach that often we could forget that he'd been around for nearly 60 years and had created some incredible music in that time. So it would be very easy to just say that Ralph Towner was a guitarist, but he was more than just a guitarist. Originally, he trained as a pianist and he went down the classical route, attending music college in Oregon. He hooked up with a whole bunch of musicians who at first developed an association with the singer-songwriter Tim Hardin, and then they went on to join the Paul Winter Consort. The Paul Winter Consort was a very interesting group that mixed jazz, especially free jazz, with American folk music, quite unique. When this band was formed, Ralph Towner was already 30 years old. He'd started life as a classical pianist and also a classical guitarist, developing classical guitar technique, i.e. not playing with a pick but playing with his fingers. Toward the end of the 1960s, he moved from classical music to developing an interest in jazz. And it was this that he brought into the Paul Winter Consort. On record, he would often play guitar and piano, and in many ways he was equally adept on those. He also played a little bit of French horn. He was a multi-instrumentalist. The Paul Winter Consort was very successful in this sort of hippie, acoustic Americana, sort of Indian jazz thing that was something that I absolutely love, by the way, and made a number of albums, but perhaps the most famous Paul Winter Consort album would be in 1972, the album produced by George Martin that was called Icarus, an absolutely wonderful album, and the title track of that album was written by Ralph Towner. It featured a whole bunch of musicians, but most notably Paul McCandless, Colin Wilcott, is it Glenn Frey, I think, and Ralph, which went on to produce one of the great fusion bands of the 1970s, Oregon. Now, Oregon, I'm a big fan of Oregon, and they're not a band I've mentioned much on this channel. And yes, they're a fusion band, but they're not a jazz rock fusion band. They took this mixture of jazz, Indian music, Americana, blues, classical music, and they developed it into something that was a lot closer, I would say, to jazz as Paul Winter. I mean, Paul Winter, there was a lot more jazz in the early days, and then as his career developed, he went more to instrumental acoustic music. Oregon had a huge career, made many albums. I think they were on the Vanguard label to start off with, and they moved to Elektra, and then eventually they went to ECM, recording 3 albums, if I can remember rightly, Oregon, Crossings, and Ecotopia. There's a huge amount of albums to check out, and that is why I have not spoken that much about Oregon on my channel, and I've just realised it's Glenn Frey is a completely different band. We're talking about Glenn Moore, and I'm not going to list the instruments that he played in that band, but because they were numerous, with Towner playing 12-string guitar, acoustic guitar, piano, but also sundry percussion instruments, some horns. There's a soprano sax in there. We had clarinets, we had cellos, tabla, an absolutely incredible band. When the news reaches me, as it does, that a great has died, what I try to do is jump onto the onto the iPhone wherever I am. I happen to be at home at the moment, and I make a video, and I try and make a video based upon what I know, how much that musician meant to me. If I feel I can't jump on camera and say anything, then I don't feel I deserve the right to say anything. With Ralph Towner, I feel I've got enough here to get through this, to explain to you, for those of you who don't know who he was, what an incredible musician he is. But I also feel that there is so much I have missed. So, as well as his early work with the Paul Winter Consort and with Oregon, and the relationship with Oregon lasted all the way up to 2019. Colin Walcott, of course, died in a car crash, I believe, in the late 70s, early 80s, and his position was taken over by Trilok Gertu. They produced a number of albums in the 80s which were interesting for the use of synthesizer. I believe he played when the synthesizers in the 80s, when you could program them and hold different patches, Ralph Towner really went over to working with synthesizers quite heavily. And it's quite a shock when you go and check those 80s and 90s albums out. I had a number of Oregon albums growing up. I had the album Friends, which featured Larry Coryell on it, which was 70s Oregon. And then I had the album Ecotopia. Now, those albums are very synthesizer-y. I was sort of perturbed by that, but I believe that Ralph Towner worked extensively through the 80s and 90s in the area of synthesis. So to, hedge him in as being a sort of acoustic musician, that's not the right thing to do. By the mid-70s, he signed to ECM Records, making his debut album, which was called Trios and Duos. Now, for those of you who want to go and buy one album by this guy and you don't have them, what would be the album to go and get? It would probably be Solstice, that he recorded in 1975. For me, the album that introduced me to Ralph Towner was actually Solo Concerts from 1980. And this is one of these sort of live solo albums that Keith Jarrett made financially viable and artistically viable, I think. And so throughout the late 70s, early 80s, there's a plethora of musicians trying to create music on the spot on just their instrument. It's about the hardest thing you can possibly do. It really is. I've always been fascinated by this. I would rather do an improvised concert on piano, solo concert. I don't really play the piano, but I imagine the way the piano works, that would be, easier than trying to do the equivalent on acoustic guitar. Now, as let us say, acoustic fingerstyle jazz guitarist, which is the way you could pigeonhole Ralph Towner, you could compare him to Lenny Breau, the other great fingerstyle jazz guitarist. They were both very influenced by Bill Evans, and they're very similar harmonically. There is sort of crossovers there. Lenny Breau's fingerstyle, of course, came from Chet Atkins, little bits of flamenco, whereas Ralph Towner's fingerstyle was much more related to a classical approach. When I heard Solo Concerts, what impressed me the most was his improvisations on 12-string guitar. The 12-string guitar has a sort of glittery, glissandi type sound to it, but it also can be very powerful. There's a lot of strings, there's a lot of power there. If we think of the guitar of Leadbelly, for example, who is one of the great 12-string guitarists. And on this album, it was really the 12 strings improvisations that really grabbed me, especially with the use of harmonics. Many of you may be aware of him for his work on the Weather Report album, I Sing the Body Electric. He plays on a track called Is it called The Moors? It's the second track on side one, and he actually opens it up with a sort of 12-string improvised sort of setting of the scene. And for many people, that track really introduced them to Ralph Towner. I haven't followed his career more recently. The last album I got from him was a solo studio album called Anna, which was very touching. It was definitely an album of an older man. He wasn't showboating as much as he does on the earlier albums. It was much more withdrawn, but very, very beautiful, and a sound that I absolutely love. So he's died today. I'm filming this the day he's died, 85 years old. I wanted to come on and pay tribute to a really, truly great musician. And if you know him, you will be able to, you know, agree with me that Ralph Towner was one of a kind, and it's incomparable really to any other musician that I can think of. And if you don't know him, then I would say to go and check out possibly the first Oregon album on ECM Records, beautifully recorded, to get the Solo Concerts album from 1980 on ECM, which is under his own name, and Solstice. I think, as I'm saying this, I'm staring at my acoustic guitar that's in the corner of the room. I feel that I should do some sort of tribute on guitar. I don't want to be presumptuous to even say I'm in the same country when it comes to this, but I feel it's something that I should at least attempt, and hopefully my inability to create an on-the-spot improvisation on guitar will contrast against how great he was. But I'm going to do it anyway, because I always feel you have to be brave as a musician, so I will do that. For Ralph Towner, I do apologise, but I do this with much respect for a great musician. This is my improvised tribute to the man. That's how hard it is. I was about to stop then. I was about to edit it, and I'm sure this is far more fascinating, watching me attempt to try and do this and be sat there quite fearful of not doing the man justice. I tried my best. Thank you for the music, Mr. Towner, and rest in peace.